Alright, so I'm going to go over advanced asset creation, which is going to primarily be about model polish, which is like, getting things into Blender properly, how to make them look nice, how to give them poses, and yeah, those are like the main things I want to. Oh yeah, and how to do like stock specific objects, so you can have different things for stock heads versus the main render. Those are the main things that I want to get out of the way. It's been something on my list for a while, but I haven't really had anything in mind. But while I was working on this costume with Uber, I thought, hey, this is a pretty good opportunity to go over how to do all this. So we got this new 64 themed DDD. Don't worry about this little pixel. It goes away as soon as you move the camera. Don't know why. Whatever. But you want to start off by opening the pack you want to export. Opening its model data and just exporting the MDL0. Now, I have a specific place I like to put all my stuff. Do I have a folder for King DDD already? I don't. Alright. So I'll just make a new one. Oops, that's not what that is. Alright, and then I'm just going to do 64 models and textures. And then I'm going to export it as a DAV file. And then I'm also going to export all the textures. I don't have the raw textures, so I'm just going to use the ones in the pack. Alright, now let's go find this polish T-pose. I have a blank scene that I'll include in the description, so you could use that one because this internal cropping scene has like a base setup, and this one will work just fine. King DD64. Alright, and then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to convert this model. Remember how I, excuse me. Remember how I saved it as a DAV file? Well, I'm going to convert it to FBX because FBX is just superior in every way. It retains a lot more data that DAV doesn't have. So we converted it with Autodesk FBX Converter. I'll also try and link that if I remember. I really recommend it for not only, model polish stuff, but also just importing and exporting from Blender, because DAV files aren't really that reliable. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Import and then FBX, and then it should just automatically put you in the directory. So now he's here. He's very small. So I'm going to go over to his object properties, the armature, which is basically a skeleton, all of his bones. I'm going to scale him up to like 0.2. And you'll see that we've got a lot of mess here. So don't worry, this is a really easy fix. It has to do with materials. So down here will be your material window. If you hit N while your mouse is in this window, you'll bring up your node options. So, like things you can do with the node you have selected. But we don't want that. We want to go to these options here and change the blend mode to opaque. And that'll do it for that material. We don't need these for King DDD, so I'm just going to delete them. And this is per material, so every material that has it, you'll want to change it. And there is duplicate eye models here, so I'm just going to delete the duplicates because we don't really need those either. Alright, so now he looks a bit better, but he still looks a bit off, and that's because FBX imports everything with metallic. We don't want things to be metallic. We also don't need these. I'm just going to delete these. So just crank this down to 0, and then the specular I would also put down to 0, just for now. That way we can see our model better. And then I'm just going to give it the old default node setup that I use pretty much for every model. I give some distance between these two, and then you can do Shift A to search, or to add, and then you hit S to search, you know, shortcuts and all that. I'm going to do separate HSV, hue saturation value. I'm just going to take the values of this texture and use those as specular values, because it does a good enough job. And then I'm going to select everything here by double tapping A and just copying it, so I can just quickly paste this over to other materials and just change the texture, so I don't have to do the same thing over and over again. And this is a really good base to use for, I don't know why I did that, for any material. You can just build off of it since it's super basic. And there we go. DDR looks a lot better, aside from his eyes. Eyes are a different story though, but I'll just get the eye whites for now. We'll go over the eyes later, but for now I'm going to go over metallic parts. So his crown is normally metallic, but his is a special kind of metallic, so I'm just going to go over the hammer right now. So depending on your model, we will want, you might have this thing where, alright, well I want this outer rim to be metallic, but I don't want the inside. Thankfully, you can have more than one material assigned to one object. But before I get into that, I'm going to select everything and do Alt-J to get everything into quads, because it's just much easier to work with, and you'll see why. I'm going to hit Compare UVs and Compare Sharp. This makes sure that no important edges will get deleted and break parts of your model that you need. And the reason why I convert to quads is because now I can select entire loops by hitting Alt and clicking on an edge, and it'll give me that entire thing, so I don't have to go around and select every face manually. If you hold Shift and do this, then you'll be able to do multiple. So I am going to just come around here, select those, and then to select these quickly, these interfaces, I'm just going to hit C to bring up a circle select, and just click, hit, and then you hit Escape to get rid of the circle. So now I've got all the metallic parts that I want to actually, you know, make metallic. So I'm going to add a new material to the reference. I'm just going to select the same material, and then I'm going to hit this button here to duplicate it. So now these are two different instances. I'm just going to put an M at the end of this one so I know it's metallic. So now I wouldn't use any more than 0.5 metallic, because things start to get too dark if you do that. But 0.5 is a good point, is a good value to get the point across that it's metallic, but also look nice. And then for roughness, I'm going to change that to 0.35. And roughness just makes things shiny. You go too low, it starts to look like wet or rubber. But 0.35 is a nice shiny metallic value. And then with all these things selected, I'm just going to hit Assign. So now you'll see that these trims look pretty nice. They look metallic, and that's good. Moving on though, let's do his crown. DDD's crown in Brawl Crate, or I should say in game, has a unique like environment texture. Like it's metallic because it has its own texture. Where is it? Right here. So this texture is gliding along the surface of this object with another texture underneath, and we can emulate that in Blender as well. So now we're going to search for an environment texture to start us off, and we're going to open that environment texture, and then we're going to change this, I'm not going to try and say that, to mirror ball. That's just, it changes how this texture will glide across the surface, and this one is just better for the kinds of environment texture that Brawl will use. Now, I'm going to put a node group in the blend that you will download if you want to follow this. That will essentially allow you to have environment textures that are as close as possible to Brawl. So you'll just want to search up proper env and just drag the vector to the vector. Now, in order to tell these two textures to, combine, so we can put them into the base color of our principled, we're going to need a mix RGB, and then take the crown environment, plug it to the bottom, and then now you'll see that we're already starting to get that kind of effect that Brawl has. The factor basically tells Blender how much of each texture to use. 0.5 is half and half. 0 is just the base. This is just the environment. We have a bunch of other blend modes here that we can choose from. I don't really know which one I would use for this one. I think on most of my scenes I just have it set to mix RGB, but don't be afraid to play around with these because sometimes they'll look better than others, and it's always nice to have that reference here. Maybe add won't be so bad. It's definitely too bright.
You got my thing? I get my cards?
It's on the table.
Okay. We'll be back.
Alright. On second thought though, yeah, that it's still a bit too bright. So I'm just gonna play around with these for just a moment and see if I can find anything. Nah, everything's making it too bright, so I'm just gonna stick with mix. I think this is probably the best one for this scenario. So now we've got his crown looking the way it does in Brawl Crate, and we've got the hammer with a nice metallic material. So now let's do his eyes. Eyes are I think they're the most complicated thing you can get in a normal Brawl model, because let me show you in his material how many. So this is how many textures get used in DD's eye material, which means we'll have to overlay all of these to have it function the same way it does in game. It isn't necessary to do his eyelids, but I'm probably going to, just because I like my T-pose scenes to be full, just in case I ever need to use his eyelids for like an angry expression or something. So I'm going to start off with the eye white at the bottom, and just for organization's sake, I'm going to add a frame. I'm just going to put that in here. Alright, so the eye white is fine being static. We don't need to ever move the eye white like we would an iris, but there is something very important here that we have to consider. The UV maps. There's a lot of UV maps. Usually, how UV maps work, or how they translate over to Blender in relation to their materials, usually UV map, the one at the very bottom, is going to be the eye white. And then the next one, like UV map 04, is going to be the iris, and then 03 is going to be the eye high, and so on and so forth. So I'm going to give this one a UV map for the very bottom one. We'll see that I think it actually does change. Yeah, so this is the proper UV map that goes with this texture. Oops. So, and you'll see here it also kind of clips, or like it wants to repeat from the bottom here. But to fix this, you just kind of come over here and change this to extend, and it'll just extend the boundaries of the image, the same color it has when it ends. So I'm not actually going to worry about the other eye yet. Oh, and the thing I just did is local view. If you hit / on your numpad, you'll be able to view the object by itself that you have selected. Anyways, now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select this and duplicate it for the next layer. Except now, this is going to be the iris, because that's the next one in line right here, iris. So iris is something we want to move around based on the pose, so we're going to need a way to move it. So let's add a mapping node and plug it between the UV map and the image texture, and change the UV map to 004. This one can stay on extend. Now that we've got our iris opened and in this node, now we can mix them. Let's get that mix RGB back so we can tell these two textures to mix. So we want to put it's a little counterintuitive, but we want to put the texture we want on top. So in this case, the iris. We want to plug that in the bottom because it does matter. And then if we try and plug it in, it'll look kind of weird. And that's because it doesn't know how to mix these. So essentially what we want is we want every area here that's black, we want that to be the eye white. And to do that, we just plug the alpha into the factor. And then now it'll work just as we want it to. And if you're basic, then this is all you'll need. But I want the eyelid textures for DDD. Most characters don't have eyelid textures like he does, so I'm just kind of gonna speed through this real quick. He doesn't have an eye high. He has eye lower. Eye lower. Eye high. Eye lower. And if your character does have more than one, like if they do have an eye high texture, then you would basically just repeat this, but again up here, like I'm about to do. So this one would go on the top, this one would go right here, and then plug that in, alpha here, and location, doesn't matter. Oh. Ah, there it is. I just used the wrong UV map. Whoops. Did I? Well, it'll be fixed by the final. Don't worry. But now I've got everything set up how I want to. The last thing I want to do is rename these. So this is the angry eyelid. This one is upper eyelid. This one is lower eyelid. This one is the iris. And this one is the sclera. Alright, just so I know what I'm looking at a glance. And then now, I'll do the separate HSV thing here. At the very end. And then for eyes, I'll just do it at 0.2 since eyes are very watery. Though for DDD it might be a bit too much, I'll do 0.25 instead. Okay, and since I made model edits to this eye, I'm actually just gonna delete the other one and duplicate mirror x y flip. All right. But this is supposed to be the right eye, and each eye must have a different material, otherwise you will have them linked, and sometimes you don't want them to be linked. So I'm going to change this one. I'm going to copy all of this. Then I'm going to change the material over to IR, and I'm just going to paste it. And rename this because apparently I'm working on the yellow one. Oh well, doesn't matter. So now we got his eyes done. That is by far, I think, the most tedious part of doing this. Some will say it's edge creasing, which we will do here in just a second. But I kind of find edge creasing kind of fun. I understand why people wouldn't, but now we're gonna move on to that. So now for actual model polish. Making your renders look good is it all revolves around this modifier right here, subdivision modifier. What this will do is it'll smooth out your model so it looks higher poly. Now this is a Wii game, so they're naturally pretty low poly. So this kind of fixes that. It makes it better for presentation. And this is something very useful to have as like a keybind or a shortcut. It basically allows you to temporarily disable subdivision for every model that's in the scene, or every object that's in the scene. And this makes it really handy for flipping in between subdivision and no subdivision, so you can see what looks weird or looks wrong at certain angles. So, with all those things being said, let's get into it. Another reason why I don't like to work in tries is because you can't actually select rings when you're in tries. See, I'm holding Alt right here, and I can't get any loops. But if I convert to quads, make sure these things are enabled, I can now select these. Which means I can, select this whole, well, not the whole thing, but I can select all this. So now here, to start this off, you see how we have a bunch of these blue edges. These blue edges are marked sharp, and what sharp means is that if you go into solid mode, you'll see that they'll have this little hard edge here, a sharp edge, if you will. And those are important for normals. These are the object's normals, how it looks without any textures, and just how it interacts with the environment. That is what normals basically are. And they're pretty important for that. And they're also pretty handy for polishing. If you select any edge, you can change your selections right here, vertices, edges, and faces. If you select an edge and you do Shift G, you can select all similar edges with the same trait. So if you do sharpness, you'll select every single sharp edge on the model. So now to edge crease, you do Shift E, and you'll get like this little slider. I personally just do Shift E and then press 1, just so it's like the maximum value and I don't have to mess with the slider. And now you'll see that it looks closer to the low poly version now. But, uh-oh, there is an edge here that was marked sharp for some reason and is now edge creased when I don't want it to be, and it creates this weird indent. Don't worry, you can unedge crease. If you do Shift E -1, you can get rid of an edge crease. And then if you don't want this to be sharp, which I don't know about you, but I don't want it to be sharp, you do Control E and then clear sharp. So now that looks pretty normal. Oops. that looks pretty normal to me. So this is actually all the polishing we need to do on this model. So now we can move on to, I don't know, the coat. Just gonna convert all these to quads, and then I'm going to start this off by just selecting all the sharp edges. And I think some models you can get really lucky with. I think that's actually all the polishing I need to do here. So now I will add a subdivision surface. And I might as well polish this part right here as well. I don't see why not. Or edge crease, sorry, not... I shouldn't refer to it as just flat out polishing. What you should and should not edge crease is all up to you, because every model is different. Every model will require you to edge crease different things. It's just what you think should be creased and what you think should be sharp, and that's the only advice I could give you. Normally, sharp edges should be creased. That is the one piece of advice that I think I can give you when it comes to deciding what should and shouldn't be sharp. And if you ever get any weird things like this when you convert to quads, you can always use the knife tool by hitting K and drawing an edge to fix that little error. Sometimes Blender is very dumb when it comes to converting to quads. So here, I'm just going to do clear sharp, and then sharpness. It is a lot of the same thing over and over again, I will admit, but I think it's worth it in the end. So now, we got a nice shiny crown that is smooth. I'm actually going to edge crease this as well, just see how it looks. Yeah. Alright. So I got the crown. Let's do his little crown top. I don't think... Some objects you just don't need to edge crease anything at all. Like this one still looks fine. And there's no like obscurities. Well, maybe there's a little bit. The next thing I'm going to show you right here is vertex creasing. It's like edge creasing, but it only does it to a vertex and not a whole edge. And an edge is two verts, basically. So this allows you to crease just one part of that. And I don't think there's a shortcut to it for default, and it's not really something I use often, so I don't have a shortcut for it. But if there's ever a feature you want to find, and you don't know the shortcut for it, you can hit F3 to bring up a list of every single command in Blender, and you can just look it up. And there we go. Apparently it's Control V. Oh, that's the vertex menu. Vertex crease. There we go. And now there's no more hole. Cool. Moving on to this. This very spiky object will kind of get butchered when you subdivide it, but that's okay. Something you'll start to just kind of feel out as you polish models is what should and should not be edge creased. And I can tell you that all of these right here, I want these to be creased because they go from looking like this to looking like that. And that's not done yet, but that's a start. I'm actually going to vertex crease all the tips as well, so they get their pointiness back. And then all these valleys right here have kind of been rounded out, but I want to keep the valleys, so I'm going to turn on simplify with my shortcut and just select all these edges and then do that. So now this looks pretty nice, I think. I don't think there's really anything else I can do to it to make it look better. So let's move on to these things, which I don't really think I have to crease anything here at all, because these are kind of supposed to be circular, blobby objects. Anything I could crease here would just kind of be nitpicky. Nothing really needs to be edge creased in my opinion. You can also kind of tell what you should edge crease depending on how intense this is. It's kind of hard to explain, But this is the original valley here. When you subdivide it, it gets like rounded out, and if you edge crease it, the valley will kind of disappear. I don't want to say disappear, but this whole it won't become as rounded, and it means the valley will come back. That's like another thing you could use to tell what you do and don't need to edge crease. It's not all the time, but sometimes, like up here, for example, how I edge creased all that because I wanted the valleys to be there. Okay, I don't think I need to edge crease anything on the eyes, so these are just gonna get a simple subdivision. And then I did the limbs, I did the coat, I did the obi, I did the hat, his mouth. Let's see. I kind of want to edge crease his lips, just so they won't be very. They won't be as open. So sometimes edge creasing certain things can get kind of weird. Like you really have to get in there. And sometimes even, if I wanted to make this easier on myself, actually, if I didn't want to like go in his mouth and look at a bunch of weird crossing verts that are hard to keep your eyes on, if you select your armature and you go into pose mode, and you shift click this arrow, you'll bring down every single bone in the menu. Then all I have to do is find his mouth bone, and I can actually rotate it. Oh, sorry. I can rotate it. So now everything is here for me to see. Like, it makes it a lot easier to edge crease. Although you'll notice it goes back when you go into edit mode on the object again. But that's fine. If you come over to the modifiers, look at the armature modifier, and you enable both of these settings, you'll be able to keep the object posed while you're working on it. So it makes it handy for doing all this kind of stuff. I'm going to mark those sharp, and I'm also going to edge crease these because I'm crazy. There. So now, to get rid of this mouth thing, what I usually do, just because it's fast, is I just double tap A to select every bone in pose mode, and do Alt R to clear the rotations. If you ever scale anything, you can do Alt S to clear the scale, or if you ever do any kind of grabbing with G, you could hit Alt G to clear your translations. Okay, that's the mouth. I still think I should edge crease these ones. They look kind of, there we go, that's a bit better. Okay. So those lips don't look, you know, open. And now I think I just have the hammer left. I got the crown, I got that. Oh, I didn't do his head, apparently. I don't think there's anything I need to do on the head either. Alright, no. Okay. This model actually has something that I thought would be a good opportunity to use this model for, because there's an example I want to use. His head and his body are actually two separate objects, which means that when you go into solid mode, you'll see that there's actually a seam here, and I don't want a seam here. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to look at both of these. I'm going to click the head, I'm going to shift click the body, I'm going to do Control J, and this will join the objects into one. But the seam is still there because it doesn't merge the objects. Like, it joins them, but it doesn't like merge them. And to do that, we want to merge all of these verts that are around where that seam was with the ones that are under here. And I usually just select everything and I do merge by distance, and you'll see immediately that these verts here are now gone. Although usually when I do that, I usually will come back around and I'll edge crease where that seam was, just so it looks a little bit closer than it did before. And sometimes it is nicer to check use custom normals under the advanced options of the subdivision modifier. Because as you'll see, these normals are kind of gross. But custom normals look good. So I'm going to keep the custom ones. And it's kind of nitpicky because you really don't see it in object mode or in material preview or the render. But I don't know, it makes me happy, so I do it. And the last things we got to do here are just the hammer, which is easy. Because if we just use all these shortcut tricks I've been going over, we can have it done in no time by selecting sharps. And I'm going to go around the star because I want its features to be prominent and not that. Oops. If you ever need to undo something, just do Control Z, and then if you want to redo something, you do Control Shift Z, in case you were wondering. And then I also want to select these edges right here. You'll notice that I turned off Simplify because sometimes it can be hard to see what edge you're selecting when you have the subdivision turned on. So it's not only handy for just comparing what it should look like, but it's also nice just to see the low poly. Easier to work with. And just like that. Oh, we have a UV thing here. If you ever get any weird things like this, where like the texture kind of deforms in a weird way after you do the subdivision, there's always something you can do to try and fix it. The most common thing I do is I'll just cycle through these options here under the advanced options, the UV smooth. Sometimes these will work. Sometimes they will, not all the time. Sometimes I'll have to tweak the UVs myself. And I think I will have to do it for this example. Alright. Thankfully this is pretty easy to do. Oh, I'll tell you why this looks weird. Anything like this, where it meets at a central vertice, will usually be weird when you subdivide it. Because this is technically bad model practice, but it's an easy fix. If you select all these faces, and then you hit I, it'll actually make a new edge loop for you that you can click and drag around. And this will actually affect the UVs as well. As you can see, the more I drag it in, the better it becomes. So I'm just gonna confirm it like right here, and then I'll do it on the other side as well. And the thing I just did there is to select this loose object, is I just hit L while my cursor is over it, and you can select it, and then I can hit H to temporarily hide it, so I don't have to look at it while I'm doing other things. I'm just going to do the same thing here, and then if you do Alt-H, it'll unhide everything you just hid, and then that's that done. So far, so good. Just seeing if there's any better options here for these corner stars. What looks better here? I'll just keep it with that one. And then, we're actually almost done with the model polish on this. There really isn't a whole lot left to go over. I think I see something though. The roughness value, I should have looked at this when I was doing the material section earlier, because normally I set up all the materials and then I do model polish, because it's just a part of my process. But sometimes you just forget a thing, so there's no shame. For anything that isn't skin or metallic or just supposed to be reflective, I usually just use a 0.7 roughness value. It's enough of a value where it doesn't look like super shiny, but it's enough where lighting will actually affect the model. Because if you see in rendered view here, if I turn up the roughness all the way, the model barely gets affected by strong lights. But 0.7, you'll see it actually gets some of that light. So I do recommend 0.7 roughness. For the highest you should go is 0.7. I wouldn't go any higher than that. Just gonna look over these things again. Apparently, I never set the roughness to this. I'll just set it at 0.35 and turn the tint up, because why not? Yeah. Specular tint just tints the object based on its well, what is this? Its base color. And I think that's it for the model polish. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly go over how you can do what was it? That's the wrong one. Go over porting this model to a pose. There's a few ways you can do it. I'm going to be going over the little more of a tedious way because there's a lot of blend files floating around that have different import settings. Like sometimes they'll import using FBX like I did. Sometimes they'll just import you using day files. And sometimes they'll even import using the animation importer, which is a whole different type of skeleton. And the reason why I bring this up is because every single skeleton has slightly different like bone rotations where you can't just copy and paste poses from a day file or to a day skeleton to an FBX skeleton. Like, you'll get some jank. So the way I'm going to go over it is basically just telling all the objects to switch over to a different skeleton. So I'm going to save this because I'm kind of done with this blend now. So I'm going to first, I kind of forget where this is. Here it is. Make pass relative. That makes it to where if this blend file is not, it's kind of hard to explain, but if the textures are not exactly right here and this blend file gets moved, then the textures will go missing, and that's not a bad thing all the time. Sometimes you just want to copy and paste a blend somewhere else and have it use the textures that are already in that other file. So I usually do that, and then just to make sure, I also go to cleanup and just unused data blocks. So you can see right here, there's a bunch of stuff that's just not used. That is just kind of taking up space. I have a few things on my quick favorites here, like pass relative, unused data blocks, some more of that good stuff. Okay, so now I'm just going to save it. And then we can actually close this now. And then, blend one files or backups, I usually delete them. Feel free to keep them, but I think they waste space, and I don't really need them right in my T-pose folder. So I just get rid of them most of the time. But if you want to have a backup of your previous save that you did before your most recent save, then keep them. But now, for this example, I'm going to copy this directory. I'm going to go to my PMHD folder, where I have a Brawl pose for DD. And then I'm going to go ahead and copy the default into this scene, and then I'm just going to open both. Because I'm basically just going to be copying the model I just polished into this scene. So I don't need anything from this scene, so I'm just going to delete everything. That's not true. I do need to look at where his irises are placed, so I'm actually just going to... Don't do that. What? I'm just going to move this over a little bit. Wait, I can't do that either. I know what I'm going to do. Alright. I'm just going to turn off the posing for his eyes so I can look at them later, move him over here, and then just delete everything else. And then I'll just remove the unused data. Because even though we deleted all the objects, all of its materials were still here, and all the textures are still in the blend. And doing that just gets rid of them, because we're not really going to be using them. Then now, I'm just going to select everything from our T-pose, and I'm going to paste it into here. Okay, and then I'm going to delete the armature. Whoa, whoops, wrong one. I'm going to delete the armature that came with our model here. And then I'm just going to reparent everything to the posed skeleton. And there's two different parents you need to do for all of this. There's the one in the modifier tab for each object, which will tell it to pose. Well, like it'll use the pose that this armature has. And then there's like the actual object parenting one. So we do this for every single one. To speed up the process, you can hover your mouse over this little box. You can do Control-C, and that'll actually copy that path. So you can just start pasting it all over here. And before you know it, your entire model will be posed. Just like that. And then if you hit 0 on your keypad, you'll switch your view to the most recently active camera. All right, and I did keep these around because I want to see the values I used for his irises. So, iris right here. So I'm just gonna copy this. And then I'm going to paste it here. Iris. Oh, I didn't even move it. Okay. And then I'm going to look at this other one that I also apparently didn't move on the y-axis. And then I'm just going to paste it in here. That was dramatic. Let me make sure of something real quick. Brawl pose, standard. Sometimes it's just might be a little bit better to, because the UVs on this are different, so obviously it'll react to different ways. So, for example, on this model, 0.8 value on the iris might not actually be that much, but 0.8 on this model is quite a lot. So sometimes you just gotta play it by eye. I'm just gonna do that because I think that's good enough. Maybe just 0.2. Yeah. Alright, now I'm going to delete the eyes since I don't need them as a reference anymore. Something I should have brought up a lot earlier was that if you have anything selected and you press period on your keypad, you'll center your camera to orbit around it. Very handy for if you just need to get up close in a certain area. If you're finding things start to clip out of existence like too soon, you could always change this clip start distance to be very low in this view menu. You can get by pressing N. And then if you come back over to the render, hit this button, we'll see that we can now preview all of our crops. Which I'm not really going to go over how this works in specific, because there's another video on that by Metal Legacy that is very good. But now, if I go over my stocks, you'll see that everything's still here. I haven't actually set up what objects go where. So a stock head is what I want. I just want his head, his crown, the pieces to his crown, and his eyes and his mouth. in the stock. But I also want them in the main render. So everything I want in both the stock render and the main render, I'm going to select them, hit M, and I'm going to move them to render plus stock. This one, though, is a bit more complicated, because I want his whole body. I don't want that in my stock layer, but his whole body also contains his head. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit Control D to duplicate his body, and then I'm going to immediately move it to the stock layer. Now I'm actually going to click off the stock layer, and I'm going to select everything that I want to keep in the main layer. I'm going to then hold Control and click this empty right here, and then I'm going to do Control L and then link animation data. That'll change all of its view model, or its viewport display. It'll link it with this object that is preset to turn off when you go to the stock layer. So now the body that's in here is the one that we duplicated, and now I want to only have this on the stock layer, so I'm going to select that empty, link the animation data. So now when I go to any other of these cameras, this one will disappear. But I'm not done with this one yet, though. I would just want everything but... Actually, that's not what I want to say. We just want to keep the head on this one. So we're essentially going to decapitate him by going into face selection mode, and then I'm just going to delete everything that's beneath his neck. You can hit X to bring up the delete menu, and then I'm just going to hit L to select this part and just delete it. So now we actually have a nice looking stock icon right here. But if I wanted to like edit this a bit more, if I wanted to, I would obviously turn on these two settings so I could actually go into edit mode. And like if I just wanted to, I don't know, just have it be a different flow, I could always use the knife tool to make some cuts, and then just delete what I don't want, like this, and then just kind of delete the back faces. Because stock icons don't matter if they're pretty or not. And I don't mean that like obviously you want it to look nice from the one angle it's supposed to look nice at, but it doesn't have to look nice back here. But I don't need to do anything here, so I'm not going to. I'm just going to undo all that. I just want to do that for an example. So our icon actually is not in frame, so I'm going to shift it to be in frame. It's a little too close to the borders for my taste, so I'm gonna do that. There we go. This V will shift it vertically. This other one will shift it horizontally. So now our render scene is almost good to go. The last thing I really want to do, or the last thing that's necessary to do, is to come over here to output properties and change this. Change the name of the file so it matches what alt you're trying to render. So I'm going to do DDD N6400 because this is the default costume for this alt. And then important you add the underscore, because after you get finished rendering it, it'll put a suffix, but that suffix won't automatically have an underscore, so it's important to keep that underscore. So now we got all that done, I'm just going to align the cameras in a way that makes my brain happy. And then I'm just going to do remove unused again. You have to do it, sometimes you might have to do it a few times. I don't know why it doesn't do it all the first time. And then make path relative, and then I'm going to do Control Shift S, and I'm going to save it under this file name. And then I'm just going to clean up these a little bit, delete those two. Now if I hit render all crops, it'll start to render everything that I just set up. And there we go. If we go find our renders folder and we go to DDD, we'll see that we have our outputs. So, yeah, this is pretty much all you really need to do. This doesn't obviously go over everything. Another thing that I can think of that I didn't go over here because DDD doesn't have anything to showcase this with is transparency. Transparency is overall pretty easy though. I will show you real quick with Marth if I have a scene of him updated. Here we go. So Marth here, his hair uses transparency. It's really easy. Whoa. Options, here we go. All you gotta do to do transparency is take the alpha from your image texture, just go alpha to alpha, from image to principled, and make sure your blend mode is alpha hashed and your shadow mode is alpha hashed. I would also recommend turning on space screen refractions for hair specifically, because otherwise your shadows are going to be very dark. And it kind of looks bad from a lot of angles. Like right here. Like, I think this is just way too much shadow. So if you uncheck it, you'll get something that looks much more realistic. Or at least much closer to how he looks in Brawl. Because in Brawl, obviously, you don't get this, this big old shadow. But yeah, I hope this has been informative for you. And if you have any questions, then I will try to answer them. My Discord will be in the description. Please don't spam me. Just leave the question, and I'll get to it when I can. I'm usually on my computer, so it'll probably be pretty quickly. But yeah, good luck with your own polishing.